10 years into the siege of Troy, the Greeks achieved their most famous battlefield victory. The great Trojan prince, Hector, lies dead, his body disgraced and dragged through the dust behind a chariot. Yet the massive stone walls of Troy remain completely unbreached. The Greek commanders face a tactical nightmare. After a decade camped on a foreign beach, their supply lines are frayed and their troops are exhausted. They have thrown their greatest heroes into single combat, but winning duels on the plains outside the city hasn't brought them an inch closer to taking the citadel itself. The conflict is trapped in a brutal equilibrium. Neither army can achieve a conventional victory, leaving both sides bleeding out in a vacuum, with no obvious way to end the war. In the dead of night, the elderly king of Troy, Priam, slips out of his impenetrable fortress and covertly crosses enemy lines to infiltrate the Greek camp. He walks into the tent of Achilles, the very man who slaughtered his sons. Priam falls to his knees and kisses the killer's hands, begging him to release Hector's mutilated corpse so a grieving father can give his son proper funeral rites. Achilles is moved to tears. For 12 days, the two forces agree to a strict truce. The Greeks and Trojans pause the slaughter to mourn their dead, sharing a rare moment of mutual grief and humanity. But the momentum of 10 years of warfare is too massive to stop. Once the bodies are burned and the 12 days expire, the armies lock right back into an inescapable cycle of escalation. Troy shuffles the board by calling in powerful new allies from the edges of the known world. Amazon warrior queens and Ethiopian kings march onto the plains of Ilium to break the Greek blockade. Achilles meets these fresh threats head-on. He cuts down the Amazon queen Penthesilea and slays the Ethiopian king Memnon, re-establishing his absolute physical dominance over the battlefield. But his demise comes from a coward's weapon. The Trojan prince Paris fires a poisoned arrow from a distance, guided by the god Apollo. The poisoned shaft bypasses Achilles' divine armor and strikes him directly in his only vulnerable spot, his heel. The Greeks watch their invincible weapon die in the dust. The loss forces the commanders to accept a harsh reality. Martial superiority and open combat will never be enough to win this war. Desperate, the Greeks capture a Trojan seer who reveals a rigid checklist of divine conditions that must be fulfilled before the city can fall. The first condition requires the Greeks to retrieve the mythical, poisoned bow of Heracles. They have to sail to a remote island to find a wounded comrade they abandoned years earlier, needing his lethal weapon to replace Achilles on the front lines. This map shows the tactical shift required for the next condition. The Greeks must sneak past the massive Trojan walls and infiltrate the citadel to steal the Palladium, a sacred wooden idol of Athena that protects the city from destruction. Notice how this pathway bypasses the main gates entirely. To secure the idol, elite heroes like Odysseus and Diomedes have to disguise themselves as beggars, slipping through the shadows to steal the artifact, rather than fighting the Trojan army in daylight. Fulfilling these obscure prophecies marks a definitive end to the era of honorable combat. The Greek military doctrine relies entirely on dark, desperate deception from this point forward. Odysseus realizes that since the walls of Troy were built by the gods, they can never be battered down from the outside. The Trojans themselves have to open the gates. The Greeks construct an enormous wooden horse. It serves as a hiding spot for elite soldiers, but its true function is psychological. It is crafted to look like a sacred peace offering left to the gods. The entire Greek armada burns its own camp and sails just out of sight, feigning a total surrender. They weaponize the Trojans' 10 years of exhaustion and their desperate desire for the siege to be over. When the Trojans emerge and find the beach empty, they drag the wooden trophy inside their impenetrable walls, ignoring the frantic warnings of their own priests. The city seals its own fate through a false sense of victory and relief. The Greeks prove that calculated deception can destroy a fortress that withstood a decade of bronze weapons. In the dead of night, the wooden underbelly of the horse opens. Greek soldiers drop down to the stone streets, slaughter the sleeping guards, and throw the main gates wide open for their returning armada. The sack of Troy is absolute chaos. Buildings are torched, citizens are killed in their beds, and the legendary city is rapidly reduced to ash and rubble. Consumed by the frenzy of a 10-year siege finally ending, the Greek heroes commit horrific acts of brutality against civilians. They murder the elderly King Priam on the sacred altar and tear refugees away from the statues of the gods. The physical conquest of Troy is complete, but it triggers the total moral collapse of the Greek army. They abandon every rule of honor they claim to be fighting for. By morning, Troy is erased from the map. Its vast wealth is loaded onto Greek ships, and the surviving Trojan women and children are bound in chains to be sold as slaves. But this map tracks the Greek fleet's return, showing the cosmic backlash for their sacrilege. The gods curse the triumphant voyage, scattering the ships across the Mediterranean into storms. Look how many paths dead end. Many Greek kings drown in shipwrecks or wander for decades, while Agamemnon reaches home only to find his throne usurped and assassins waiting. The Trojan War yields no glorious triumph. The conflict simply hollows out two civilizations, leaving the vanquished dead and the victors cursed. It stands as a timeless warning that the ultimate price of total war is often everything you fought to protect.